live right now. Oh wait, yep. Looks like we're live right now. Sorry for that infinity video. I'm gonna make my Zoom full screen. Awesome. Hi everybody, I'm Priyanka. I am Director of Cloud Native Alliances at GitLab. I contribute heavily to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and I'm on the governing board now. It's a recent thing. I'm very excited about it. So we're going to kick off 2019 with a conversation with Chris Dutra here, who is from Schireson. I want to chat with him because we met at KubeCon, and he was at a panel I conducted, which was on navigating the weeds of cloud native tooling. So in that conversation, I had T-Mobile, CVS, Lyft, and Delta Airlines come on stage and share with us their thoughts on cloud native, how they see it impacting their organizations, and finally, what are the challenges they face when looking at the myriad tools that are available. So today we're continuing that conversation, and I'm so excited to have you here, Chris. Welcome. Totally. All right, so to kick off, I'll introduce yourself. Mm-hmm. Awesome, very cool. So you were at the panels. I'd love to hear your brief takeaways so that the audience can learn as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Traditional brick and mortar type of a store
Mm-hmm.
that is obviously in a big competition now with like what we call an Amazon economy.
Right.
Everything's online, everything's ordered. So I think for them to be able to migrate to or start or continue their cloud native journey, that's super important for like kind of the survivability of the business.
Right.
So and that's kind of something that you see a lot. You see like for example, Sears, right? They failed to innovate, and as a result, they're having a lot of financial difficulties.
Unfortunately,
now.
Yeah.
And I think for someone like a CVS, that's a super important part because folks don't need to walk into a store anymore to get what they need. They may need online to refill their prescriptions or something like that.
Right.
Also, when you think of CVS, that they're partnering with like Target now,
Mm-hmm.
and Target is pretty much known as having like pretty well on their cloud native journey.
Mm-hmm.
So there's especially from a partnership level, that's super important. Now, T-Mobile in a sense is kind of along that, but I think they're a little different because they not only are they kind of like a brick and mortar store, but they also sell a service, which
Right.
is telco, right?
Right.
So I think what's important there is bridging the gap of they want to go to 5G. It doesn't make sense for them to be on legacy technology.
Right.
So it's important for them to have that at least from a marketing standpoint. Lyft, I think, had probably the easiest cloud native journey because, they're a relatively young company. And, I think from that standpoint, they're not dealing with a lot of different types of legacy assets.
Right.
So that makes that a lot easier for them to kind of innovate. Also, having competition such as Uber, they're in a position where they need to continue to innovate. So
innovate or die.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Totally. It was interesting because do you remember how Matt was like, everybody else was talking about their Kubernetes like plan and how they were on it, and Matt's like, oh, we're actually not on Kubernetes right now. And I know they're planning on it, but it was so interesting because they're relatively young. They were able to kind of, I think, build a lot of stuff themselves in the beginning.
Right.
And then like Envoy is an example that they contributed, which was cool.
Yeah. And I think lastly, Delta was interesting to me because when you think of the criticality of the services that
Mm-hmm.
they provide, right?
Mm-hmm.
a cloud native journey for them is a little different than a lot of other companies, because their stuff goes down. We're talking about massive delays at airports. We're talking about, you know, maybe planes can't get off the ground because of scheduling conflicts or something like that. It's much, the criticality of their systems is super important. So they have to probably take additional steps with regards to security, with regards to, you know, fault tolerance and stuff like that. So that's super important. But it's great to see that a company like Delta is able to actually get going on their cloud native journey.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. By the way, I'm going to do a quick gut check to make sure our YouTube live stream is working fine. I've hit record here just as a precaution on Zoom, but let me do a double check real quick. Sorry for anyone looking live. Okay, let's see here. Yep, that looks like it's working. Every time I go there, it gets, you know, the infinity. So yeah, that's what like scares me for a second. More thing really quickly. Let's see here. Okay. Oops. Never mind. All right. Let's back to. I'm pretty confident it's working. Let's go back to full screen. And then the worst case is recording happening. So we're good. All right, cool. So no, I absolutely agree with you. I think it was a demo, and everybody had different problems, which is interesting, you know? And so speaking of different problems, I'd love to hear where you're at with Schireson.
Sure, and I think we have an interesting, you know, it's not unlike what you know the folks are going through. Because traditionally, when you think of data scientists, they're going to have these huge desktops with, you know, graphics cards and all of this to run different types of machine learning and artificial intelligence. But when you think of, you know, you come up with this great software solution. How do you scale that out so multiple people can use it? You can scale humans, but that's probably not efficient. So, you know, when we think of scaling software, you know, the cloud really comes in handy. Now, with my background, I've been using Kubernetes probably since about 2-3 years now. So bringing it in to have it work was a pretty natural fit for a lot of like the backend services and front end services. The challenge really is migrating those data science workloads onto Kubernetes. And, you know, a lot of the challenges there was the resources are not deterministic. So, you know, you could have spikes in CPU and memory, and you had to be careful to not make sure you brought down your entire cluster, for example, which we did plenty of times trying to test this out. But so that's why we had to get innovative around how Kubernetes interacted with our data science workloads. But also important to that is how Kubernetes managed them as well. So we didn't want to get to a position where we were spinning up 100 nodes and, you know, leaving them on forever, because that's not cost effective. But also, you know, if the client is running the workload and it's taking longer than them picking up the phone and calling the data between the two, that really gave us that, you know, happy medium and gave us a true service.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So a little use Kubernetes in the first place. What was the biggest motivating factor?
I think the biggest motivating factor for that was that, you know, having, you know, so we have about 30 engineers and about 25 data scientists or so.
Gotcha.
And, you know, so the supportability, you know, I came in as SRE number 1. So being able to have to manually orchestrate and support all of that was not going to fly. So having, you know, and Kubernetes does a lot of that, and like being able to, you know, restart pods, and, you know, do all of those different things. And, you know, when you're comparing it to solutions like Docker Swarm or something like the richness of what you get out of the Kubernetes API is far superior to what Docker Swarm is, from my opinion. So ultimately, and plus too, like the community around it too made it a lot easier for us to if we had issues or anything like that, like it's much easier for us to get up and running and keep running.
Yeah.
Which was really important. So that's, kudos to the community for that. But in turn, when you look at the CNCF ecosystem, right, there's a lot of great tooling that's being built, and some of it is specifically for Kubernetes.
Right.
We initially went down looking at Envoy and ended up using Ambassador. So that's actually being used for our API gateway. So essentially we have Envoy at the edge, but we're using it in a way that, it's a nice API gateway that all of our services connect into now.
A lot of people have been talking about Ambassador as a product out there.
It's really neat. I mean, you essentially get Envoy at the edge, and what's nice about that is it's super simple to set up, but also if you're used to working with Envoy metrics and observability, you actually get all of that. You can hook all that into Prometheus, and you have it all ready to go.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah.
The only thing I think, and they're working on it now, is actually getting Ambassador to start using the V2 APIs from Envoy.
Gotcha.
And I think once they have there, you're gonna have a lot more feature-rich things. But the DataWire team did a fantastic job with it.
Yeah, no, I heard similar feedback at KubeCon. As you know, GitLab, we're a believer of the single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle, and we want to embed the observability experience into the rest of your workflow. And it sounds like Ambassador is making progress in that direction as well, at least from the service mesh to API, to all of observability perspective, which is super cool. Obviously, the world moving in a direction that we have seen work really well. So how did you find Ambassador? I'm curious.
It all started, we started out as we were going through, and I took a couple of the folks because, the developer team here didn't have a ton of Kubernetes experience. Okay. So we had a meetup actually at HBO, which is across the street.
Oh, nice.
And some of the folks from Envoy, they started showing off Envoy at a meetup. And
where is this, by the way? I forgot to ask where you're based.
I'm in New York. Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay. Got it.
Right,
HBO. That makes sense. That's why it's across the street. I was like, it's definitely not in San Francisco.
No. So we were.
Sorry, you broke up for a second.
Envoy. Oops. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So we were there, and they were talking about Envoy, and we saw a lot of the traffic shaping and different things, and that was great, and we really wanted to go deeper into Envoy, but we had deadlines, of course.
Right.
So when we were looking at Envoy, there was what we call, it was like Ambassador was kind of used as the Kubernetes provider. So we were able to get Ambassador up and running, and it was honestly probably like 2 or 3 days of work to get like the configurations the way we wanted them, and we had it good to go in production.
Nice. That's a big deal.
Yeah, it really was, because especially at that point, we were probably 10 engineers and I was the only SRE.
Yeah.
We've grown a lot since, but to be able to deliver software as quickly as we needed to, that actually, it came in handy big time.
Absolutely. And did you, so you know how on the panel, Jasmine from Delta was like, there is the AEIOU of of how to decide whether a tool is ready. With I think one of them with E was enterprise readiness. So how did you do that?
So I think a lot of it, we were able to. I think when you combine something like that with the kind of enterprise grade readiness of a lot of components in AWS, we felt pretty confident about it.
Gotcha.
Hooking it up as the traditional Kubernetes service, it just tied into a elastic load balancer for us. So there wasn't we weren't sitting there thinking, okay, we have to set up ingress or anything like that. Right. Like ingress wasn't involved in this at all.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I think from that standpoint, we were, it was for us, it was like deploying a service essentially. And then basically each of the other deployments into that internally.
Yeah. That's super cool. And so, so clearly you guys have adopted Envoy through Ambassador, and that sounds like it's really going well for you. And particularly because observability is now baked in, it sounds like, in your tooling there. So how do you connect this piece of tooling, which is the metrics around stuff, with the rest. So for example, your CI/CD pipeline, your unit tests, all of that.
Sure. So I think we keep it simple for now.
Okay.
So with one thing we are looking at, because we're actually building out a kind of enterprise grade continuous delivery now, and we're looking at things like Spoker. So I think that this plays in nicely to how we want to go with A/B testing, canary releases, traffic shadowing, those types of things. So we're looking into that. I think for us, it was kind of, let's keep it simple and then we can expand on it. So we would have traditional rollouts of Kubernetes. So, we would just update deployments in time, and they would just be kind of rolling updates.
Gotcha. I'll put in a mandatory plug. Since you're looking at CD solutions, you should definitely check out GitLab.
Sounds good.
I'm just going to say that. But okay, awesome. So tell me this. One of the big we discussed in the panel, right, was just there's so many tools out there for so many specific problems for a specific kind of system. What's been the experience in your team when it comes to, okay, we decided to go cloud native, and okay, now we have 500 tools, or did that not happen? What's been the experience like on that front?
So that has happened to a certain degree. And I think the key thing, I kind of have two philosophies with it. One is right tool for the right job. And, I think one thing that we try not to do here, just because we're not Netflix, we're not Facebook, we don't have 1 million requests per second or anything like that. So for us, as long as it's reasonably, satisfactory, I think that we can get by with, certain tooling. So, there wasn't ever a need for us to say, hey, we should really, revisit, native Envoy at the edge. Ambassador is working just fine. So one thing is right tool for the right job, but also not broken, you might not want to fix it. So I think that's also, it's also something to keep in mind and consider. When it came to certain things, and I have another example of this, where thinking about data pipelines, ETL, and so forth, we had a bake-off. So we had, there were certain teams that were super interested in using their particular tool.
Sure.
So we gave them a week, and who came up with the best solution is one we went with.
Gotcha.
And what's nice about that is it's kind of, you get a nice little hackathon thing.
Right.
So culturally, it's great for the engineering team, but also you see which tools shine. For us, Airflow is amazing.
That's very well recommended by people. Yeah, for sure.
Ended up being used, and we're using it everywhere now.
Oh, wow. That's nice. So just so I understand, different people, different teams had different tools of choice because they thought this was the right job. However, it sounds like the mandate was we got to consolidate. And because you don't want to have 50 tools, right?
Exactly. I mean, we're a small team too. So from SRE side, there's only certain things that we can support, but we were open to the fact that, and that's why we encourage the bake-offs, because people are motivated to show off what works for them, and also to we get an understanding of what the value proposition of these tools and how it's gonna.
It's the best way to learn without just reading. It's by seeing and it in action, it to you. Yeah, no, that's really smart. I think if anyone's listening, this is a good idea. Do a bake-off, because then it's less about just emotional opinions, which have their place too, but it's more just okay, let's just the proof isn't. And it's interesting to me. So you said you're not a huge team, and still there was a bunch of teams that wanted to do participate in the bake-off. So I'm curious, how many I guess people or teams do you have, and how many were in the running?
So we had, I think it was 3 tools in the running that were there. We're kind of like a large team. I mean, we have functional aspects to each team and what they work on.
Sure.
But at that time, we were one big team. So there were pockets of folks that had
gotcha.
opinions on things. So
and how many people was that? I'm just curious to see as I do the 2 tools or something like that. I don't know.
I think it depends depends, right? I think in some instances, like for example, like the consensus largely here, like Kubernetes won out. There wasn't like a second tool or anything like that.
Yeah.
With certain, like, you know, ETL, when we were going through that, I think that we had a handful,
Okay.
but I don't think we've ever had like more than 2 or 3. I think it was mostly like people had strong opinions about 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Mostly based on past experience.
Yeah, and that was like you said, like how big is that team? Sorry.
So our team is we have about 30 engineers now and about 25 data scientists. So,
gotcha. Okay, so about 55
so
people.
We support both. So,
yeah. I always, I know everyone's unique, but I think in terms of you know, like it's a reasonable bucket to support both as like one. Cool.
Yep.
No, this is super helpful. Thank you for sharing. So when you think, for example, Airflow, right? Do you think about what from that AEIOU, the I, which is the integrated piece? How much do you guys care about that integrated pieces of your puzzle?
It's important to us because, you know, one thing that we always try to achieve here is that when we have, you know, if these pieces aren't integrated, then there's probably some manual step in the process that we don't want to support, or also, you know, if an edge case hits and something breaks, you know, then the pagers are going to start flying. So I think from that standpoint, like the integration piece is super important. Airflow working into what we're doing with Kubernetes and, you know, our managed databases, it's really, really helpful.
Nice. What do you use for managed databases if you are?
We're all AWS, so it's Redshift and RDS.
Gotcha. Awesome. Awesome. Very cool. So since we're talking about cloud, let's switch topics a little bit and tell me, like, so are you an all AWS shop?
We are.
Okay, gotcha.
For the most part, yeah.
Okay. And do you, so for the most part, that means you're multi-cloud, or you mean AWS plus bare metal?
It's AWS, it's multi-cloud. Yeah. So in some instances, we have clients that will do stuff on their cloud. So, but like for the most part, like the media optimization piece is all AWS.
Gotcha. Okay. And so, given that there are pockets of other clouds, but it's mostly like, let's say it's a AWS shop, would you say the tooling you pick is impacted by the cloud you use? And do you look at interoperability between clouds, even though, I mean, you are an AWS shop, so this may not be that big.
I think, so it's a fair point. I think right now, we're small enough where the cloud is probably too much. It's probably a little overkill.
Yeah, I hear that.
Because in that stance, you know, we don't need 5 nines of availability or anything like that. So so from that standpoint, we'll probably have a little bit more lax requirements where like a single cloud provider is fine. But from the, you know, especially with folks on the panel, like you have to look at multi-cloud. I think that, like, you know, their situation's a little bit different. Like, you know, having US East 1 and AWS go down, like, is a big thing for them.
It's a really big problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, T-Mobile or probably don't want that.
Exactly.
Right. No, that makes sense. So tell me, Chris, where do you see native journey you just adopted? Envoy through Ambassador, you're obviously all in on Kubernetes. I want to hear 2 things. 1, what's been the results so far? And 2, where are you going next?
Sure. So the results so far has been great. We haven't, knock on wood, haven't really had any major like cascading outages of production. And I think a lot of that has to do with the resiliency of how we've set up Kubernetes native. So that's worked out awesome. I think for us continuing on our journey, I think big thing is we want to standardize on continuous delivery. That's a big thing for us. That way we tidy up and be a little bit more deterministic on where things are getting deployed, but also, you know, we have other smaller projects that we want to onboard and have kind of a single pane medium support. So that's huge for us.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we're looking at we're actually evaluating some EKS stuff now. So managed Kubernetes. We're traditionally running on EC2 at this point.
Gotcha.
I still have some like concerns with EKS and kind of the maturity of the product right now.
Right. I hear that.
But I think that said, I think, you know, in talking with them at KubeCon and so forth, I think they're on the right path. And I think in probably 3 to 6 months, they'll be in a good spot. But obviously the value for us there is that if we don't have to upgrade a cluster,
that'll be amazing. Yeah,
fine.
I actually did at AWS reInvent. I did a live demo of deploying Kubernetes clusters to EKS. I used GitLab for the process, but it was interesting. It was nice to be able to, like, with EKS, we were like able to do that. I had help setting up the clusters and everything from teammates as well. But yeah, if you want to check that out, I'll send it.
Sure.
Yeah, it might just, you know, get some interesting ideas in your head.
Yeah.
It was so nerve-wracking, honestly. It was like, you know, when you like kick off a pipeline on stage, you're just like, well, I hope this goes through. I've tried it many times and it did, but you never know. I told the audience, like, okay, I kicked off the pipeline. Let's all sit and pray and hope that something doesn't go wrong. And it worked out, so it was really fun. It was fun. But yeah, I'll send you that video. It might be useful. Cool. Okay.
Great.
So in terms of results, I hear, okay, so it's been really useful. Failovers, and it's all. And in terms of next steps, so you're saying standardizing on CD is the big one next. Awesome. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing your journey so far. I'd say before we wrap up, I'd love to know if you have any advice you'd give anyone watching.
Yeah, sure. I think especially if you're new to Kubernetes, this is probably one of the best communities I've ever worked with, ever, with like any open source product. So do not be afraid to like jump on Slack, you know, go to a meetup in your town or city, wherever you're at. I think that what's really cool is that not only virtual community great, but I think that the in-person community has been fantastic as well. And
I agree.
you know, that is going to help the learning curve. I think, you know, even just looking at, you know, it's easy to kind of fall into like, you know, all these different distros and vendors and so forth, but like understanding Kubernetes and like how it works from an architecture perspective is super critical, because, you know, when it's off and you're looking to try to support and fix something, having that base knowledge is critical. It's so critical. Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that.
Thank you so much, Chris. Well, this was really fun. I'm glad you joined. We had this conversation. I'm going to be doing more of these. So if anyone who watches is interested in speaking, please send me a note. You can tweet at me, PRITIANKA, or I think you can use the YouTube chat, something like that. Just provide your thoughts on cloud native and where you're at in the journey, and we'll take it from there. Well, thanks again, Chris. This was really fun. I'm going to turn off recording and then turn off the YouTube Hangouts on air, and then we'll wrap up offline. 1 second.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Stop recording. Yes. Exit full screen. This is my first time, so I'm sorry to everybody.
No.
Not so. Okay, no. Okay. All right, let's see here. Google Hangouts. Stop screen. Thank you to everybody who I'm going to stop the broadcast now. Thanks so much. Bye.